This is an interview with Ms. Eloise Staples from Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. We're at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Today is March 5th, 1997.
I want to thank you, Ms. Staples, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and sit and talk to me today about Birmingham and the movement. And I'm sure what you will share with us will be a great benefit for anyone that will view this. So, thank you. Let me just ask you about your background, your family background. Were you born in Birmingham?
Born in Birmingham.
What about your mother and father? Were they from Birmingham?
No, my mother was born in Columbus, Mississippi, and my father was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. And my mother came, this is the second marriage. My mother came to Birmingham when she was, I guess maybe 16, 14, 15, that's correct. She was raised by her grandparents and had an opportunity to teach. Back then, if you finished high school, you could go right into teaching. But because her life was such a hardship, she opted for marriage. And so she came to Birmingham and married, and this is where she settled. So I am the sixth child of seven.
6 or 7, so you're nearly the baby.
Nearly baby.
And so your mother finished high school.
Mm-hmm.
What about your father?
My father died when I was 6. As to the best of my knowledge, I assume he had a formal education. I know he had some education. I remember him vaguely. He had a heart attack, and he worked for US Steel or TCI. At that time it was called TCI.
Right.
And basically, my mom never really did a lot of talking about him. I don't know if it was because it was an unhappy marriage or whatever.
Did your mother work outside the home?
Never worked a day in her life.
She never did. How did she take care of the family?
From income from
From
my
your father?
previous husband and my dad in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
pension.
Right. How many boys and how many girls?
There are 2 boys and there were 5 girls. So I had a sister to pass and 9 boys.
So what neighborhood, what community did you grow up in?
2 blocks, half a block from the Institute.
So you live right downtown.
Right downtown.
Yes.
We call it Smithfield, so it's blending in,
Okay.
but downtown.
So what school did you go to?
I attended Lincoln Elementary
Started in Lincoln.
and Parker High School.
Oh, okay. Well, you had no other alternatives.
Right. Everybody went to Parker.
Well, I don't know about that.
You must have gone up.
No, I was a renumber.
Oh, well, we didn't count you. You were in the county, so
That's
you
right.
didn't count.
That's right.
Because
All right.
late you became a 6.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. What do you remember about your days at Lincoln?
Oh, a lot of good things about Lincoln. My favorite teachers, the education, the standards of education, the fun things.
What were some of the fun things that happened at Lincoln?
Well, we had a real good PE teacher named Mr. Thornton, and we used to do the May Day every year and the May poll. And we had a very good home ec teacher, Mrs. Buzz, who was the sister to the Bradfords down on Bradford Funeral Home. Had a very good teacher, Mrs. Ferris. The elementary school was very good. Frank Adams was my band teacher. And Mrs. Chambliss was our music teacher. And we had, education was different.
So you were rather active in extracurricular activity.
Yes.
You played in the band.
Yes.
What else did you do?
Well, basically, I played drum. I had always do things that were not kosher. We just didn't see girls playing drum, but I played drum in band. And I was very active in, I was an art student. And There weren't very many things to do, like you worked in the office and sold pencils and paper, that kind of thing.
What was your neighborhood like? You live right downtown. What was that like?
The neighborhood it was mixed. It was middle income, low income. You had across the street from where we lived was the Rapid House, where Dr. Hamilton's office is now. And it was like the hub for social gatherings. And so Mrs. Perkins was like our adopted mom. And then the lady next door to her was Leila Fair, who owned a cab company, and she had a restaurant, and then it was Perkins' friend, the Oasis, and it was just the hub of the culture. A lot of the affluent lived there, as well as the mediocre and the very low income. And you could be right here and see the affluent go to the Rapid House, and you could go around the corner and see the people going to the bootleg house. So, it was like a mixture.
Right. So you were privy then to influences from across the spectrum in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And you left Lincoln and went to Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was it like going to Parker High School?
Well, being the sixth child of 7, you had a family history, sort of speaking, and you had to kind of live up to your siblings' background, their reputations, right? And so in some instances it was awful because, I had 3 sisters one sister was getting ready to graduate, and then I had one who's like maybe 3 years ahead of me, and they were all very good people, and I was very mischievous. And so I had to kind of, a hard road to hoe, as they would say, because you had people like Alma Dixon, who was one of the teachers there at the time, who knew everybody and knew my family, would always say, I don't want you here, so you didn't do very much that was far from the course of being right, but from an academic standpoint, high school was very good. We didn't have the advantages that later came with integration, but we had the standards that superseded the norm because our teachers expected more, and especially if they knew. They expected a great deal more. It was just not normal to do mediocre. They instilled in you a value, a quality that made you want to excel. And it was like a close-knit family because everybody knew everybody.
Right. Now, you were a freshman at Parker in '63 during the demonstrations. And you got involved. How did that happen?
Well, initially it started out because there was this boy down the street that I liked, right? And we would sneak off to the movies because Mama wouldn't let me date. And by some, I got caught up in the emotions, the message, because as a child, we didn't own an automobile, but we went places. And I often wondered why I couldn't go to Fair Park. And my mom would say, well, you can't go over there except on certain days. And I always wondered why. I couldn't understand why I couldn't. I couldn't understand why when we walked from the Carver downtown, if we wanted a crystal hamburger, we had to stand outside the window and order a 10-cent hamburger. And there were seats inside, And I couldn't understand. It didn't matter that it was, I just couldn't understand if my dime was as good as his dime. Why couldn't I just go inside and purchase what I wanted?
Did you ever rebel against that as a child prior to the movement?
Well, I don't think so. Not really, because we grew up in an area where you had the Italian stores on all the corners, and so we all played together.
You played with Italian children?
Yeah. And So, it didn't become a thing about black, white because, Mountain Brook then seemed like 2,000 miles away.
Mhm.
Hoover didn't even exist. And so, you knew your place, so to speak. So it really didn't bother you until the subconscious became the conscious as far as why not? And I started asking questions. I think the thing that really got me was when the marches started and when they had the riot and burned all the stores and burned the buildings and that kind of thing. And I think the thing that stands out most in my mind was when I can remember there was this police car stop. It was car 57. And just so happened it was a movie that used to come on TV like car 57. And whenever they would pull over a black person, the black men always could never hold their heads up. They had to always look down. And if they look up, they said, "Are you looking at me? What are you doing?" Looking. And I couldn't understand because my mother always taught us eye contact.
Right.
She said, stand up, be strong. Eye contact, articulate. You've got a question, ask. And that was it. They didn't coincide. There was a gap there, and I couldn't understand. But back then, children were taught to be seen and not heard. So there were questions that didn't get answered until later in my adult life that helped me to understand and comprehend some of those things that a question answered you.
Right. Did you attend mass meetings?
Yes.
How would you describe the mass meetings?
They were awesome in retrospect. I think the thing that I remember most about them was that the unity. It was like you were mesmerized. The moment was so strong and intense, and the people were so, I don't want to say fierce from a standpoint of anger, but they were so strong in what their emotions were so strong that it was contagious. And even if you went with the intent of fooling around, you listened because and I don't know, it was just a euphoria, I guess. It just made you.
It filled you up.
Oh yeah. And then it made you stop and think. We weren't into reading newspapers and watching news and that kind of thing, but it made you wonder, well, what's really going on? And
Do you remember the first demonstration that you were involved in?
yes.
What were the circumstances?
We had a cousin, and she was weighed about 97 pounds. I guess she was about, I guess back then everybody was old. So she might have been about 50, 57. But she used to walk from Smithville to go shopping at Woolworth's downtown. And she had asked my mom to let me go with her. And my mom said, no, I don't think so. And so she came back and she had an encounter with one of the clerks where they were boycotting. Mm-hmm. And she liked to buy washing powder from Woolworth's. And she had gone into the store and was coming out. And one of the clerks grabbed her bag and made her spill her washing powder. So she had come back to my house and she told my mother she started shooting the foot. And so my mom said, no, you can't correct a wrong by doing wrong. And she said, well, the next time they march, I'm marching with them. And so that's how I said, well, what are they going to march about? And Mom said, oh, you don't need to know. And so when we went to a rally, and they were going to march from 16th Street Church downtown. And I kind of just snuck in the crowd, and that was the first experience I had as Pommy.
What was that like, marching from 16th Street to downtown? What was that feeling like?
Well, at first it was hype. I was just excited. Like I said, I didn't know the implications of what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to be a part of something that was different. And I didn't understand the impact. I knew it was important because there were other children there. And not having been we lived in a very close community, close family, and had not really experienced we knew about segregation because we knew it was there, but had not really been said, do this or do that, because we didn't venture very far. But not to the extent that some people had experienced. And by my mother not working, she had not experienced true segregation in terms of the work, the master over the employee per se.
Did you ever ride the buses?
We rode buses to downtown. But see, we didn't ride the buses often because we lived right in the heart of downtown. So we walked everywhere we went pretty much. But every now and then we would ride the bus to school on inclement days. But most of the time my mom would call a cab and send us to the cab. But just automatically went to the back. You didn't question, you just went to the back.
In some of the interviews I've had, students were at schools, either Parker, Overload, Fairfield, and many times they were asked to leave school by a movement person. Did that happen in your case?
Yes, it did. We had been asked, in this particular, I can't recall the exact incident, except I can remember what I did. We had been asked not to go to school on this particular day. I don't know what it was regarding. But anyway, my mom had said, well, you've got to go to school. And I said, well, Mom, they don't want us to go to school. She said, well, but you need your education. I said, well, it's important that we don't go to school. And so she said, well, you've got to go. So I said, yes, ma'am. And I went on down 7th Avenue and I got to about 12th Street. And I yanked the collar on my dress. And I had braids and I pulled my braids loose and put some dirt on me. And I went home and I said, there were some people down on the corner down there, they threw dirt at me and pushed me around and told me I could not go to school. And so that's how I got out of it. But I know I lied. I know that. But I was bound and determined that I was going to show my unity.
What did your mother say when you
She said, they did what? She said, who was it? I said, I can't remember who they were. I said, and then I ran and they went on about their business. And so I went to my sister's house. I didn't go back home. I went to my sister's house in Smithfield. I just drove around past school and went over to my sister's house. And I told my sister what had happened. And she said, She said, yeah, okay, all right, I believe that. Like she do. But my mother really believed me, and I really felt bad about it after, some time. I never told her the truth though. I didn't feel that bad. And, but I remember that because, and I can even remember what I was wearing, because it was so important, that we show that solidarity in terms of.
Did you go to back to your sister's house, or did you come down to the church?
Well, my sister wouldn't let me leave. She said, you may not go to school, but you're not going to be in the street either. So I didn't care. I had just done what I set out to do, and that was not go to school. So I ended up staying at my sister's house. No, I didn't get to participate in the rally, but I did not go to school.
Yeah. Did you participate in any other demonstrations other than the one that you described earlier?
Yeah. I was very active going to the mass meetings. I tried several occasions to get on. I wanted to go to Selma. Couldn't go. My mom said no. But whenever they were marching in the street, I figured out a way to get there, just march. But I was just one of a number of people. But one of the things that's standing, I guess, foremost in my mind is when they were on 16th Street Church. We lived on 7th Avenue between 14th and 15th Street. The Beards were friends of ours at that time. When the church was bombed, and Chris McNair was my homeroom teacher.
At what school?
at Parker. Junior Collins, Addie Collins, one of the girls that was killed. Sister was in my homeroom class, Junior Collins. Carol Robertson, I ran the name together. So, it was really traumatic for us. And at the time when they bombed the church, we were not members of 16th Street Church. We were members of Zion Hill, the little church on the corner now, but it's changed names since then. But we were getting ready to go to church, and our house just shook when it bombed. And we heard this loud blast, and our house just shook like the earth was quaking. And we all ran in the direction of the sound, and we looked out our back door, which faced this area, and you could see this big cloud of smoke. And we kept trying to figure out what was going on, because my mom said, "Don't go outside, don't go outside, get back in here, get back in here." Excuse me, then we learned that the church had been bombed. And, we tried to get, my sister and I tried to get up to see what had happened, but they had everything roped off, and you couldn't get within a half a block, because it just looked like people just came out like ants on
What was the mood of the people?
Some were angry, some were ready to riot, very militant, and some were very hurt and crying and in dismay. Most of them were more curiosity seekers and in dismay of someone could do that.
Now, prior to the bombing in April and May, when the demonstrations were going on, you participated in the demonstration. Many of the people that participated with you were arrested. Were you ever arrested?
No. Never got arrested. So I'm one of those people that have to push the boat but never really got on it. Never really got arrested. The closest I came to getting arrested was when they were loading us up. They had a bus on 16th Street and 7th Avenue right in front of Old Fagan House, Ice House. There's an empty lot now. And they were loading them up on school buses. And I jumped in line, just knew I was gone. And that's when the guy said, "No, you're just too good." Even though I had the age on, I was 14, but I looked like I was about 10.
You said the guy. Who was the guy?
He was a white police officer. I have no idea who he was.
What did he say to you?
He did, Mom kept us real neat, with the blades. And he said, "Little girl, what are you doing?" He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "You need to go home." He said, "You're just too small to be going over to," because they were taking them over to their park. And he said, "You're just too young, just get on off the bus." And he took me by the arm and literally just turned me around and put me off the bus. And I stood there in dismay, and he said, "Go on, go." And I kind of just dropped my head, and at the time there was a store in the corner called Norman's Grocery. And I dropped my head and walked over to the corner by Norman's grocery store. And I was trying to watch him out of the corner of my eye, and he said, "Go on, go." And so I just went on home.
Were there other friends of yours or relatives that were involved with
No, unfortunately, no.
So you went on home. Did you tell anybody about the experience?
I told my sister, and I told my mom, and she said, "Well, he knew what to do because he knew you would have been in trouble, And I said, "What?" And she said, "You didn't need to do that." Yeah.
Were there any of the other siblings involved in the movie?
No, the ones who would have been were out of town, lived out of town, and the ones who were in town, they were like my sister Leela, was scared, so I knew she wouldn't do anything, she wouldn't do anything like that. She would stand back and watch, but she would not participate. She'd have her opinion, but she was not going to get involved. And my sister next to her, who would have been active, was married, and her husband was didn't want her to participate. They had no children, and I have my brother who's younger than I am. He was too young to really be concerned And the other siblings were, out, lived, two of them lived in California, and the other was married, and her husband didn't know how to participate.
Did you leave school ever to participate in any demonstration?
No, I would, once I got in school, I was at school, but I never really, those instances when I could, I just didn't go.
Do you remember other students leaving school and participating?
2 or 3. I remember one, his name's Andy. I don't remember his last name.
You don't remember the day that students walked out in mass heading to 16th Street?
I remember that.
And you didn't go that day?
I wasn't at school that day. I was at home sick, but I remember that day. I was at home sick.
What did you do after you finished high school?
Well, after I finished high school, I went to Eloise Staples. Went to Eloise State to got a degree in education. And taught school for a little while.
What did you teach?
Well, I did make history. I integrated. I was the first Black teacher for the Roebuck campus of Alabama Boys Industrial School, which is now back on campus. And brought my sister on, who graduated from Miles, and so we were like, I was there about 3 months, and then I got to hire my sister, and then about a year later, we got to hire another friend. So I guess in my own way, I did something.
What was that experience like being the first?
It was very interesting, very rewarding because Lamar Holcomb was the principal at the time, and they had not had teachers, but they had not had anyone like me. Let's put it like that. So I came in with all these new bright ideas, and this was just when they had started to integrate the campus. Our young people when they got in trouble always went to Mount Meadows. And this was like Harvard in comparison, say, to, I don't know.
To Mount Meadows.
Yeah. And it was like, you know how the prisons are now for the elite? It's like going off to a resort. It was like a resort.
Well, how were you received as the first Black person at the institution by both the boys as well as by staff?
Very well. For one thing, Mr. Holcomb had laid the groundwork for my coming. And I was very young and not intimidating at all. Very soft spoken, but very smart. I'm not saying that to be, but I think their impression was, well, here comes somebody, And I brought in a lot of new innovative ideas that was an enrichment experience for the young people. I did a lot of remedial classwork in terms of reading and those types of things. And I came in very quietly, but not from an intimidating force, which made it very easy for me to come in and sort of mix and mingle and get the things that I wanted done. Because Mr. Holcomb was a very open-minded person. And I think his superintendent at that time was John Carr, and he was more so doing it because he had to. But Mr. Holcomb was very open-minded.
He was your leading supervisor.
And allowed me a lot of leverage in terms of doing some creativity there because there had been none. And so the halls were dark and no bulletin boards or anything. We just went in and did some things and created some in a wholesome environment for the young people who at that time were not your hardened criminals, but were there for choice.
They were Black and white?
Yes, this was the beginning of integration for the Roebuck campus.
About what percentage was Black at the time?
I would say 20%, give or take.
Right. And how long were you there?
4 years, 5 years, and then I went to the Birmingham school system.
What school did you teach?
Mid-Holman, Barrett, did some work at Wilkerson, did my practical at Wilkerson.
And why did you not stay in teaching?
Well, that's a different story. I was in a car accident, broke both my legs, both knees, and I was in my 10th year of Birmingham Board of Education. And you know how it is. I was the last man on the totem pole, and so while I was out recuperating, they gave my job to somebody else.
Did you never get back in the system?
Well, I stayed in teaching. I worked some with that church school, but I got involved with seniors, and I liked what I was doing.
The rest is history.
The rest is history.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us about either growing up in Birmingham, your remembrances of the movement, any aspect of Birmingham?
Well, Birmingham yesterday and Birmingham today are two totally different entities. I can remember very vividly during the riots, Bull Connor.
And you refer to the riots. Are you referring to the night that
They burned.
that the Asian Gas Motel was bombed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And as a result, in retaliation, they burned the houses and the stores. This entire sector was bombarded with police. There were, let me see, this is what we used to call it, pick it up. We call it the stores by the people's name. You had Mr. Jerome's store, which was right here on the corner of 6th Avenue and 15th Street. Across the street was Joseph's store. And then down on the corner was Charlie's store. And then you had Vincent's on the corner, 7th Avenue and 15th Street, across from St. John. And they just tore this area up. I mean, everything was burning, and then of course, here comes Eugene Bull Connor out of City Hall in his white tank. And it stands out so vividly because he was in that tank on the bullhorn saying, all right, using the N-word, get in your houses. Then they instituted a curfew. And for about a month, everybody had to be off the streets by 10 o'clock. And again, that we were in the middle of everything. And, we were like standing on our porch watching as these things happen. And my sister and I were in a conversation with each other. And, we didn't realize then how important these things were. We didn't realize that we were living through a part of history that would be there for a long time in terms of impact the whole world in terms of the effects of integration. My personal feelings as far as the movement, I think it was a very good thing, but I think the impact of Dr. King, it was not just about interracial marriages. It wasn't just about interracial dating. It was about equality, fair play, treating a man as a man, a woman as a woman, regardless to the color of their skin. If I go to the trouble to get an education, then I should be given the same opportunities as my white counterpart to compete for that position if my credentials allow me to. I think in a lot of instances, you didn't ask me this way, the concept has been lost.
The concept of
The King's emphasis in terms of equality, racial equality. And somewhere in somebody's mind, it has been distorted. And I think for the young people coming along, including my children, there needs to be more activities like this, where there is documentation. For those younger people who didn't have to go to the trouble of black and white water fountains, or the black and white bathrooms, and maybe staying outside in the rain or catch a hamburger, or not being able to, if you go in a public store to try on shoes, you've got to wait because they got a little section over here for you where you go and in a section over here. It passing by a playground and you can't understand why you can't go in there and ride except for certain days. They don't understand that because they don't see the black and the white signs, and for some young people, they don't even believe the intensity,
Do you think that the system played any role in how you would see life after the movement itself?
When you say the system.
The system of segregation had any impact upon your life as the way that you would view it, after this?
Well, and this is just one woman's opinion. I think in some instances we were better off in a segregated society.
Right.
From a standpoint of, not from a standpoint of education to a degree, but our standards changed tremendously. The family unit changed tremendously. We became, not all of us, some of us, and when I say us, I'm talking about the blacks in general.
Right.
We got caught up in the moment of, now I can go and buy Mercedes, and now I can shop it.
So you said it became a materialistic kind of venture as a result.
Because I guess, and maybe some people may see this as being distorted, but again, because I had a scholarship to Jacksonville State University, and I didn't take it. I told my mom I didn't want to be a statistic, and but the focus has shifted. We have all opportunities for education, and our young people are not grasping. And we did a Martin Luther King Day of Service here at the Institute on Martin Luther King's birthday, and we had brought in some older people to do a little history, and two of the people didn't make it, so I ended up having to kind of have them. And as I started talking, I got caught up in what I was saying, and the thing that overwhelms me so much is that the young people now cannot balance what's happening as to what has happened. And I try to emphasize the importance of the number of lives that were lost.
Mm-hmm.
And these people did not die fighting for something just so we could all go in the same house. Or it was more than just about being able to buy a hot dog and sit beside a white person at a lunch counter. You had to start someplace, and so that was the starting point. But when you look at what's happening with the affirmative action laws that are on the books, and the types of laws that people in California are trying to pass to repeal affirmative action, our young people who are the leaders of tomorrow have got to educate themselves so that they can maintain, and not just maintain us at this level, but carry it on. And it's not just about minorities as blacks, it's about minorities as a whole. And I try to instill this in my children. And I just hope that we don't have to regress, because I don't think we have a leader as charismatic as Martin Luther King who could say nonviolence and mean it. You know what I'm saying? Because people are so militant now, and see, I don't think people now are concerned about their brothers. They no longer realize that we are our brother's keepers, regardless to what we may think, and it's going to take. I remember the poem, "No man is an island, no man stands alone," and it's going to be. I'm good at doing this, but think about the Ku Klux Klan. When they were in their power, it had to be a mob,
Right.
you know, and until you have seen a cross burning, and you know, we had those during the movement, you know, and to realize that these things really happen. It's not just Mississippi Burning, the movie. It's actual history. And our young people have got to really understand that if they don't get an education, the shackles are no longer on our ankles, they're on our minds. And in order to loosen the shackles, they've got to get an education, because once it's here, no one can take it away from you.
Do you think adults are playing a role in allowing young people to be where they are today in terms of consciousness about who they are and what's happening?
I think it comes back to the breakdown in the family. The matriarch of the family was the stronghold. You know, we know that, I don't know if it was because of what happened during slavery or whatever, but usually the female in the family was the one who kept things together. And you have so many dysfunctional families now. And you have so many young parents who are children, raising children. So those values have not been instilled. And so they're losing a lot.
If there's a movement going on today, as it was then, would you allow your children to be involved?
I would insist. And not so much because I want them to be a statistic, or not so much because I want their names splattered across the media. But I believe in doing what needs to be done. Be a giver, not just a taker. If you're going to reap the benefit of someone else's labor, then you gotta get in there and pull that chain along with other people. And like I said about myself, I might have been on the end pushing the boat. I may not have gotten on the boat, but I know that if I had not been there and put my 90 pounds in, that boat may not have moved. So even though I may not have been a key player, whatever contribution I made, I felt that it was worthwhile. And I feel that my children, and I instill in my daughters that, you know, you may not want to go to school and get a 4-year education, but you got to do something beyond high school, because you have got to be a contributor to society and not a drain on it.
How old?
My youngest daughter is 20. My oldest daughter is 27. My oldest daughter has been in the Navy since she graduated from high school. So she's been in there 10 years this year. And when she chose to go to the Navy as opposed to furthering her education, I said, fine. If that's what you want to do, you're not stealing, you're not prostituting, and you're not a burden to society. Just make sure whatever avocation you choose, that is something that you can carry with you. You know, just go in and say, I carry a gun, or I swim, the Nile River, whatever. But I just feel that parents have got to get back to parenting and instill, you know, it's okay to wear name brand clothes. What's that guy's name? Tommy Hickaby. What's his name? Yeah, whatever. Or Liz Claiborne. It's beyond that. You know, it's not just about quick and easy money. And we have got to instill that in our young people, because we've got to have some leaders.
They are our leaders. They're leaders of the future.
That's right.
Ms. Staples, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. It's been very helpful. You draw a picture of what your life was like and how you interacted with other people, which will be very helpful to us. And I would like to just thank you for taking time out of your schedule to do it for us.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.